while I'm going through the next couple of slides, it'd be really nice if we could start introducing each other in the chat. So your name, whereabouts in the world you are, and what club you've come from. And if you've got any current fundraising challenges or questions, pop them in the chat as well. And we can try and answer them when we get to the Q&A part at the end of today's session. So hi, I'll introduce myself first. I'm Shana Lord. I'm the Inclusive Club Network Manager here at Access Sport, and I'm joined by our Director of Fundraising today, Tom Dixon, who will be leading today's webinar.
Hello.
Thanks, Tom. We have got a couple of new faces on here today, which is great. So I'm going to do a little brief overview of who Access Sport are, in case you haven't heard of us before. We're a national charity who believes that no one should be excluded from the transformational benefits of sport. We support community clubs and coaches to tackle the barriers faced by underserved children and young people. And clubs that work with us are supported through hands-on club development, training, kind of one-to-one support. And after they've worked with us for a period of time and got their sessions set up, they're invited to join our Inclusive Club Network. And they can benefit from opportunities like this webinar, other events, and other resources. So if you haven't heard of the Inclusive Club Network before, we're a national network of clubs, all working towards the same goal of transforming lives through sport. We're trying to create a network that's a space to connect with like-minded clubs working in grassroots sports, and it's a place to share knowledge, learn from each other's experiences, and most importantly, celebrate the incredible work being done across the UK in community sports. Now, I know we've got a real mix of people on today's call. The subject kind of context we're going to be talking in is going to be UK based and really focused on community sport. But if you've got any questions about fundraising as a whole, please just drop us a message and we'll do what we can to answer it. I'm now going to hand over to Tom, who's going to be leading today's session. Over to you, Tom.
Cool, thanks, Shana. Brilliant to meet you all. Excited to be on the call today with you all. Thanks for giving up your lunchtime, and hopefully we can help in some way. So I'm going to talk through sort of my experience of I work for Access Sport. I'm fundraiser here, but also I've done a lot of volunteer fundraising for community clubs, for scout groups and others as well. So hopefully I can bring a bit of experience from both those areas as well to this mix. What I'm going to talk about, it's not rocket science. A lot of it's sort of relationship building and planning and that side of things. So we'll go through that. But I think, equally as importantly, we'll be hearing from a couple of guys that have been successful in their fundraising, especially with sort of Sport England's movement fund. We'll hear from those guys in a bit as well, after I've kind of gone through some of my experiences and what I would recommend. Great to see the notes in the chat there. So people from lots of different sports, lots of different places. Someone's got an issue with my sound. Is that an issue, Shana?
It's a little bit fuzzy. I don't know if you're able to use headphones, Tom.
Yeah. Give me one second. Is that better?
Loads better, yeah.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. Fantastic. So yeah, it's brilliant to see so many people from different clubs, different sports, and hopefully we can just give you something practical to sort of take away. So if we move on to the next slide. So for me, from my experiences of working in volunteering in sort of community clubs, is making sure there's some responsibility for fundraising in your sort of organization. I know, like, in some of the clubs I'm in, people are either coaches or their chair or their treasurer, secretary, whatever. There's not always a specific fundraising role. So what I found really works is that if everyone understands what you're trying to do, which is obviously to raise money for your core work or what you're trying to achieve as a club,
That's great, but someone really needs to lead on it. They need to lead on the plan. They need to lead on upskilling themselves. They need to be that spokesperson on fundraising at committee meetings or in other settings. So what I found works really well is making sure that someone puts their hand up to sort of lead that fundraising area for your club. It I found it doesn't always work that well if it is just the chair of the club because they're so busy doing everything else. Whilst they might be a great fundraiser, they might have lots of connections. Having someone else own the plan can work really, really well. The other thing I've done in sort of community fundraising is to have a couple of the committee or a couple of parents who might be in the group to come and join a sort of fundraising subcommittee. So whilst your sort of lead fundraiser leads that subcommittee, they're not doing it on their own, and they're drawing in support from parents who might be well connected or who might have experiences in sales or fundraising or other areas. So that can be a really great way of doing it, sort of creating that subcommittee, which can take the pressure off the wider committee. And it, you know, for a lot of what that fundraising lead is doing, they're reviewing those needs. They're looking at, well, what are we fundraising for? Is it equipment? Is it facilities? Is it ongoing costs? What are we looking to do? Planning that sort of calendar of how you're going to do it. Looking at different deadlines and opportunities that come up, planning that sort of information that's required for fundraising, and then making sure that those events are delivered and planned properly. And we'll go through each of those areas in a bit as well. So on the next slide, we're looking at actually what can we as a group, so it might be a committee, how can we build enough information to plan what we're going to deliver? So we have to know our finances inside out. We need to know what we're really trying to achieve from a stats perspective. What's it going to cost us really accurately, and what are we trying to deliver, and therefore we can make sure we plug those gaps. And I think that's a really important thing. And like, if anyone's seen Dragon's Den, most people tend to fall down on that when it comes to the financial questions. What's it going to cost you? What are the numbers you're aiming to achieve? And often you'll see those fall down because people haven't nailed those down. And I think you, like, having that sort of bank of information ready to go for your club or your group is really, really important. So you are aware, as if you're assigning this to a sort of lead fundraiser, that lead fundraiser needs to work closely with the treasurer to have all that information to hand. What's it costing to do certain outreach or events or put on certain activities or sessions? So making sure that you've got that real accurate financial picture to hand is really important. And what are you therefore needing to generate? You know, that all links together. Knowing who your members are, what you're charging them, how all of that side of it works is really important. And for us in the inclusion space, obviously knowing your members from a protected characteristics perspective, how many of your members are ethnically diverse or disabled or so on and so forth, because that can open up different pots of funding depending on who you are, what you're trying to achieve as an organization. And also knowing your local areas statistics are really important. When I did some fundraising, I live in Buckinghamshire, a fairly wealthy area, but there's some really poorer pockets, like there are in other places, or financially deprived pockets. So it's just knowing those statistics, knowing who, you know, what you can leverage in your area or as an organization to create the sort of best case that you will need later on when it comes to asking for money. So getting those stats and those finances in order is really important before you go out there and start sort of asking for money. that's the sort of heads part. I think, you know, from a fundraising perspective, you really need to be able to tell those stories. So having a bank of stories or people that can tell stories is really important. What have you achieved through your club for young people? You know, can you tell those stories of the participants you've helped and tailor them to different audiences? You know, putting an application into Sport England is very different to speaking to a local major donor, for example, or a parent who might want to give £10 a month or something like this. So you need different stories to be able to speak to different types of people. Now, we all know that, you know, things are very visual these days. Videos speak 1,000 words, and sort of creating video content and speaking to people just using a mobile phone or other things like that can be really, really powerful. And actually, I think I saw Salford Tennis on here. Like you worked with us to make a really brilliant video for an application we did, and that was quite, you know, it was talking to a parent and them telling you their experience. And actually thinking about it now makes the hair stand on the back of my neck, because that parent was kind of saying that she doesn't get these opportunities for her disabled son. She just doesn't get them. And this tennis opportunity that she got through Salford Tennis has actually changed their life. And that is the real gold dust that you can record really simply on things like mobile phones, having that type of stuff ready to go, backed up with imagery. And so you can kind of tackle the heads and the heart stuff and have that side of things really, really ready to go and pre-prepared before you start asking for money. And so on the next slide, we talk about, well, that bank of information is really about building that case for support. So having that financial information ready, all of your statistics, having your stories, your case studies all ready to go. It helps you to create that case for support. Why would someone in a competitive marketplace give money to your club over someone else? And so you need all the information that you've got ready to go, really. And what we'll do, you know, at Access Sport is we'll have this ready to go depending on the project or the place we're fundraising for. And that is about what are we doing? Why are we the best to do it? What makes us unique in what we're delivering? You know, there's lots of charities out there, lots of clubs asking for money. Why are we unique at tackling the specific thing that we're doing? Who are our participants? Back to that point we made earlier. What makes them need you as an organization, and what do you deliver for them? What benefits do they get, you know, from working with you specifically? What are you offering? What projects do you need specific funding for? And it may be that you come across someone that only wants to give money to a facilities project. So is there anything you've got ready for that to ask for that money? And we found sort of creating those key messages, those elevator pitches is really important. You know, you don't know who you're going to meet. If you're a cycling club, you might be out in a park, at a track, someone walks past, asks what's going on. Do your team have that sort of elevator pitch ready to go? Do your coaches have that sort of message, those key messages ready to go? So having that and kind of passing that out to your organization is really important. And working out what the ask is. You know, you can ask for some, you know, knowing who you're asking from is important, because that helps you to steer what the ask is. And for something like the movement fund, it's got a cap on it. That's not always the way with people, but working out your ask and what someone might give is a really important sort of process you need to go to when you're thinking about asking for money. And obviously then tailoring that information for the audience that you're talking to. So it's just drawing all of that information together is super important, because you will be asked these questions, you know. So if you go into a conversation with a trust and foundation, they've asked these questions from someone 1,000,000 times and they've got the answers back. So if you've got them to hand, it's impressive. It helps to for people to trust you as an organization that you're going to deliver on their sort of investment in what you're trying to deliver. So that case for support is super important. But it's really interesting, you know, for me, if I'm volunteering in my local cricket club, for example, knowing, oh, that's what things cost, or it's really interesting for volunteers to get under the skin of what it is to deliver a community club, and how much it costs, and what the difference you're making is. I've also found a sort of changing demographic where I live. So we are where I live in South Buckinghamshire, we've got a bigger Indian community where I live now, and the way they traditionally support and give money is different to how it's traditionally done in my area. So we're doing things a bit differently. We're looking at different ways to fundraise, different events to put on, and that sort of thing, depending on how your community is sort of changing and evolving. And obviously involving everyone in that community is really important. So once you've got your case for support, we would recommend then sort of creating that plan and assigning people to that plan. So we're looking at, this is just a very sort of rough example over a sort of 6-month period. Okay, so what are we doing to ensure that we have a plan and some responsibility assigned to this? Because when everyone's really busy, things, it can be 2 months later and you haven't worked on that thing. So for me, it's about getting those events in the calendar early doors. And that might be a fundraising event. It might be a summer barbecue for members. It might be whatever. You can always turn these things into ensure that they have a fundraising element as part of it. Looking at those local trusts, looking at the Sport England Movement Fund, do they have funding deadlines? Let's map those in. Let's ensure that those key people in the club know when those key funding deadlines are. It might be a governing body pot of money that has a key deadline as well. Let's know when those deadlines are. Let's put them in. Let's make sure people know, and let's make sure we work our way through those applications so that they go in on time and we don't miss them. Getting the money is one thing, but obviously reporting back on that money is super important as well. And so as you become more successful, you need to tell those people that have given you money what you've done. So having that side of things in place, telling those stories again and moving that through is really important. So kind of alongside funding deadlines, we'll often put in to make sure we've got those reporting deadlines as well, that we know the dates, that we need to go back to funders to tell them how their money was spent, because if you don't, they might not fund you again. And then we've got a line here about membership. Okay, so what are we doing to market? Because membership's obviously a sustainable income generation piece, and that therefore making sure you've got that marketing plan all in place around membership, and ensuring there's membership and driving that is another sort of key factor. With sort of grant funding as well, it can be year to year, but it can also be longer term. So we'll often prioritize trying to get 2-3 year funding. That then gives you that sustainability and helps you to build that in a bit more. Obviously, if that's not available and you're getting 1 year funding, that's when it's really then key to re-put in new funding deadlines and reminding yourself that, okay, we've got the funding for a year. Let's make sure we ask again in 10 months' time so that there's continuity in that funding pot. So building in those funding deadlines, making someone responsible for those, I've found is really, really important. Cool. So the next one is about when you're actioning that plan, who is in your organization. And for me, this is kind of it's always been important in fundraising. I've been fundraising for sort of 22, 23 years. And the relationship side of fundraising has always been really, really important. Like, do they know your organization? Do they trust you as a person? Do they understand what you're doing? And that's that whole case for support and so on. But finding out from your members, who are they connected to? Who are the parents coming to your club? Who do they know? Who do they work for? That's really, really important. And I did some PTA fundraising recently, and it turned out we had someone from a large multinational company that gave donations if you prove you were volunteering enough hours for that organization. We wouldn't have known that if we hadn't done a piece of outreach to parents and said, you know, we're looking at fundraising more. Do you work for anyone? And so on and so forth. And that just sparked someone's like, oh yes, my company does give donations to charity. Let's ask and let's find out. And I think that's really important. So finding out those insights about who is connected to your organization is really important. And it's definitely, as the sort of bullet points say here, is about giving people that opportunity to fundraise for you. They come to your club for a reason. They love what you're doing. So why not let them sort of give back as part of that? And lots of companies have different schemes to support fundraising. Put an example of Salesforce here that match for events. They might be able to give pro bono support, so supporting on websites or marketing or other things like that. And are there any larger influential networks that you're connected to? You know, so really finding out who your makeup of wider community is, so those parents and their networks is really, really important. And then on that sort of point, the next slide shows the communication side. So this is where you really need to sell yourself. As a fundraiser, it's sort of, you're selling hearts and minds in a way as a fundraiser, and you've really got to present yourself. How are you unique? Why do you do what you do in that unique way? And sort of making sure you're then telling people about it. And that might be through newsletters. It might be, you know, drip feeding it out through social media. It might be a conversation that you have with someone at a club session. It might be as part of your outreach or through your different channels. You know, you might have ambassadors for your club. You might have, you know, people that have become elite sports people through your club. So how can they help? And just seeing who you're connected to and how you're connected is really important. And you know, lots to think about from a communications perspective. But again, assigning these roles, making sure people are responsible for that communications, and that may be a different person to the fundraising person, but assigning out that responsibility is really important. We wanted to kind of just put a note in here about when you're sort of planning and strategizing around your fundraising, is just really thinking about what are you best placed to do from a fundraising perspective. So the next slide shows some sort of thoughts about, well, how can you build a different fundraising mix? If you don't have expertise in grant funding, that might not be best for you, but where else can you get sustainable fundraising from? Is that by running sort of 2 big events a year that you are geared up for? Is that by running by reviewing your membership, or by running other types of events, fundraising events, or crowdfunding campaigns, or getting sponsorship from local companies for things? So I think you need to play to your strengths, and you can't do everything. It's sort of tempting when you're kind of looking at your finances and you're going, right, we need money to do these projects or this or run the organization. Right, let's try and do everything at once. And I think that's, you know, that's not always possible. There's lots of opportunities, lots of different ways of fundraising. So I think it's about thinking about what your strengths are, who you've got in your organization, and how you then kind of build that fundraising mix together. So definitely playing to those strengths, trying not to overstretch, starting small, building it up, but definitely starting straight away, having that plan, assigning the rollout is really, really key. And we say in the last sort of bullet here, work with Access Sport, work with your relationship manager with Access Sport, stay in touch with them. They may come across different funding pots. They may know different ways that other clubs have fundraised, and peer share as well. You know, get involved in other organizations and clubs in the Inclusive Club Network, speak to them about what's worked for them and how else they've sort of managed to fundraise. And here's a sort of example of a model, a funding mix. Maybe half your money comes from membership fees, maybe a quarter comes from facilities hire, some from events, some from grants, some from individuals. You do need to kind of plan this in a really structured way, because you never know. You know, COVID taught, if it didn't teach us anything, it taught us that money, income streams can change overnight. For a lot of charities who raised money through fundraising events, for example, they stopped overnight. So it's kind of thinking about that mix, and can you protect yourself through difficult times and weather different storms. So having that good mix is really important, but a mix that you can manage and a mix that you can make sustainable, I think is really important. And having those conversations with your Access Sport relationship manager, I think is really important, because you know, we want our activity to be as inclusive as possible, and sometimes financial barriers are the sticking point for inclusion. So how do you ensure that your membership fees are manageable for your participants and so on? So I think it's a really important discussion to have at you know, a committee level, making sure that there is the right mix, and that you are able to manage it. There's a couple of opportunities that we wanted to flag today as well of funding. One sort of through Access Sport and then Sport England, which we're going to go and talk a bit more about in a minute. So the Angus Irving Playing Field Fund, if you haven't heard about it, it's a fund managed by Access Sport, a family fundraise in memory of Angus Irving, who was really passionate about community sport, about facility development. Sorry, just going to grab a drink. They give out grants up to £5,000 in Greater Manchester, Oxfordshire, London, West Midlands Combined Authority. And they're looking to fund clubs. There's 4 opportunities to submit a grant application a year. And they're looking to fund clubs that are working on the social inclusion side of sport, but really looking to fund sports clubs that want to do brilliant work in their communities and change those young lives. So there's more information on the Access Sport website if you look for AIPFF on there. Yeah, opportunities for grant funding up to £5,000, and there's no limits on numbers of times you can apply. You can apply every year, but worth doing, and you can speak to your Access Sport relationship manager about that one as well. But a good source of funding. And then the Sport England Movement Fund. So Sport England launched this last April, £15,000 for those physical activity projects in the community, and it's rolling. It's an ongoing application. We'll hear about how onerous that application is in a minute from the guys that have actually been successful, but we know they're giving money, we know there's successful projects, and it is a way of leveraging some money to ensure you can get those projects in. And then one last point I wanted to make before we hear from those successful at the Movement Fund is just, yeah, it is not to go it alone. It can feel quite lonely if the weight of the world of financial burdens on your shoulders. So ensuring you do speak to Access Sport, that you speak to your partnered organisations. Maybe it's your governing body, maybe it's other local charities. We know that Charity Excellence Framework, that we use them quite a lot for things like information on different funding pots available for specifically different things. There's lots of renewed and interesting information that comes through there, so that's one to look up. You can sign up for newsletters and information from lots of different grant givers or providers, or for example, if you're in London, the City Bridge Foundation, they have a newsletter with funding pots on. There's lots of different organisations that will do funding information. So it's just sort of staying current, but having someone that is on top of it. And you're not alone out there. You know, we can support, and there's lots of other organisations that can support as well. So I'll hand back to Shauna, who's going to introduce those clubs and organisations who've had those experiences with the Movement Fund.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Tom. Yeah, so we finished on mentioning the Movement Fund from Sport England, and we're now going to speak to two guest speakers from two kind of very different clubs who have been successful in their application to the Movement Fund. So we're joined by Abby from NICAS, who are a climbing organisation spread across the UK. And we're also joined by Laura from Send a Welcome, who run a Skittles club down in Bristol. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can actually see Abby and Laura. So give me 1 second and I'll spotlight them both so we can all see them. Sorry, I know that's so daunting every time it happens. Add spotlight and then there we go. Amazing. So I'm going to just get you both to just briefly introduce yourself, a little bit about both the clubs and your role there, and then we'll jump into a bit more about the funding afterwards. So Abby, we'll start with you.
Hi, can you hear me okay, first of all?
Yeah.
Great, thanks. So my name's Abby Blakey. I'm a project manager at NICAS, which, as Shana said, it's the National Indoor Climbing Awards scheme, so quite a mouthful, so abbreviated to NICAS. And we are a registered charity and are committed to lifelong happy climbers all across the UK and beyond. Established in 2008. We have over 270 providers of our climbing scheme. So we provide climbing schemes. So I always equate it with gymnastics or swimming for people who kind of know those awards. So if you do your swimming awards, you do certain skills and then you gain recognition for those. That's kind of an equivalent within climbing. So it's training people the skills to climb. Yeah, and as I say, we provide the scheme, and then climbing centres are accredited with us to then deliver those schemes within their climbing walls. Yeah, and the project that we applied for Movement Fund funding from is called NICAS Ascend. So NICAS Ascend is a specific climbing scheme, and it was actually, for those who know Sarah Jones, who works for Access Sport, it was originally her who approached us with the concept of a climbing scheme that's specifically targeted at and designed for disabled and neurodivergent climbers. So this was going back a couple of years actually when we first spoke about it, and quite a lot of work was done to develop that scheme. And then we got to a point where additional funding was required, and that's where the Movement Fund comes in. So I'll stop at that point and come back to the funding element in a bit.
Amazing. Thanks, Abby. And yourself, Laura?
Firstly, can you hear me okay? It's a bit echoey.
Yeah,
good. So I'm from Send a Welcome, and I work on a project called My Community Bristol. We're Bristol based. And I am the community development lead. So we work with organisations across Bristol, North Bristol mostly, to develop inclusive activities, and we also provide some ourselves. So from the Movement Fund, we actually have gained two fundings, one for our Skittles and also another for our we call it sensory story time, which is aimed at people with like more complex learning disabilities, wheelchair users, that sort of stuff.
Amazing. Thanks, Laura. We'll stick with you while you are off mute. I'll just see you mute yourself again. It's okay.
That's okay.
I know we briefly spoke before about, obviously you were successful in the Movement Fund. Can you tell us a little bit about how you found that process? Yeah, kind of how long it took you, how many people were involved, and yeah.
I have to be honest, I think I did both of them in less than an afternoon. It was very, very easy, very quick, which was quite good because I wasn't sure. I was kind of just punting a little bit of luck on it, thinking, oh, it'd be great if we could get it, kind of thing, but I'm not going to waste too much time on it. But they did come back with some questions for us. So just to put into context, we didn't ask for very much money, and we didn't ask for anything that covered overhead costs. So it was just our like the fees of the building hire, the staff costing for the coach, and also a small amount for some marketing. So we got about £3,000 for one and about 500 for the other, because one runs just every month rather than a weekly session. So it's not a huge amount of money. But the questions they came back with were quite interesting. They asked to ask a bit more about the physical activity that was involved. They asked about why the participants were currently inactive. Is it because they're wheelchair users? And I explained that it's more to do with the conditions that people may have, and also about the social aspect of sport and how we try to make them inclusive so that people can make friends and be sociable, that sort of stuff. They asked about the age range and about funding when the project ends, so how you'd continue funding, so not after just the 1 year support. So I thought they were really good to share, because I think that's important things to address when you're writing the application.
Mm-hmm. And I suppose during that process, in terms of support from either Sport England themselves or maybe your relationship manager at Access Sport, did you get much support through that process?
Yeah, so I rang them at the beginning and they were really helpful on the phone, because I wasn't really so sure if they would accept the sensory story time, because it is about movement, but it's very gentle movement, and it's because there's not really an awful lot that kind of fits that target market already in the area. So we were looking for something specific that was very gentle movement. But yes, they were very supportive of it. The other thing that I think was good in terms of our application is that we are a disability-led organisation, and I think they quite liked that and that appealed to them. So everything that we put on in the community is led by an action group, and 75% of them have a learning disability, and they kind of help orchestrate what happens basically and how it happens. Another thing that just to mention is that obviously we're aware that there is a need for specialist kind of provision, and that is really, really important. And what we do is specifically aimed at disabled people and neurodivergent. But what we've said is that part of our group, it would be to integrate with other organisations and other like community groups. So for instance, our Skittle group, we are having a bit of a tournament against the community centre that is hiring the Skittles Club to us. So it's more about integration rather than segregating the group, and that was really important.
No, that's amazing. I will just quickly say as well, if anyone's got any questions for either Abby or Laura, please pop them in the chat. But I'm going to jump over to Abby now, because I know your experience. Oh, sorry, go on, Laura.
If you're in Bristol, the Stoke Park, Friends of Stoke Park funding is also a very good place. We've been given funding from them as well. That's it.
Thank you. So Abby, you recently have done a crowdfunder for NICAS Ascend, and the Sport England funding played a huge part of that. Do you want to give us a little bit of insight into your experience of the Sport England funding, but also the crowdfunder as well?
Yeah, sure. So the two we're discussing, I was looking back to when we were first talking about it, and it was probably like autumn time last year, and we were discussing them with Access Sport actually about funding and the movement fund, and we actually applied to it in December, and we had the response in the 31st of January from Sport England to confirm that we'd received the movement fund. So I think they can either say we'll give you a grant or a contribution that you can match fund through the crowdfunder, which was something we're keen to do, because we had in mind opportunities to gain extra funding through crowdfunding, and also I think Sport England are quite keen to invest in tangible items, so there's certain things that we'll be doing that element of Sport England funding will cover, such as equipment costs or production of physical assets like logbooks for participants, and they were quite keen to know like these are the things that will be funded, and it's quite it's part of your funding application. You have to be really clear what it is you're asking for, and then the funding that's given is clear that that is what that money covers, if that makes sense. So yeah, we were keen to also make it the crowdfunder part of our fundraising, because our target was 26,000 and the movement fund element from Sport England is 11. So then you have to achieve your crowdfunder, like match fund, essentially what the Sport England movement fund element is, to get the money from Sport England. So yeah, but we had confidence that that was achievable because we'd been working for a while on building that kind of growth behind who would approach about the crowdfunder, having those kind of networks in place to approach, and yeah, kind of it's quite a lot to do with a crowdfunder, we discovered, but for us it was worth doing like the two together.
Amazing. I think that brings me on to like one of my other questions was there anything that kind of cropped up during that process that you weren't expecting or took you by surprise? And I can imagine the kind of management of the crowdfunder was maybe one of them, like you just said.
Yeah, I think with the crowdfunder, a big thing was keeping up momentum with it. So I think we did actually, my manager Nick Parkin and I went to a session that was quite useful before we went live with the crowdfunder, led by a crowdfunder with Sport England, from what I remember, about making sure you're prepared and also, to keep that momentum going, and that most people tend to donate like at the start or towards the end. So our crowdfund is actually still live. We've achieved the target, but it's live till 1st of April. And so during it was like to try and keep that momentum going. We did quite a lot on our social media. So at NICAS Climbing, if anyone wants to look at it, you'll see every time we were getting donations come in, especially we had quite a lot of like larger donations from organisations that we work with or who are going to be supporting us. We'd make quite a big splash on social media to try and keep that momentum up and keep people talking about what we're doing and sharing and thinking, oh, what's this about? So that involves work, to create assets, to have the photos or the little short videos. And Tom mentioned earlier about having those sort of heart stories. That was quite a big thing for us as well, for the more personal donations, to really kind of link it back into who's going to benefit from this and the actual real climbers who would be able to take part in our schemes as a result of this investment. That led to a lot more of our personal donations. I think the more companies sized donations, I guess, they're also really behind the outcomes, but they're linked in with NICAS as an overall organisation as well. And I think for us, that link with Access Sport and your club's network and having that kind of expertise as part of what we're trying to achieve helped with that side of things. So, we're a good bet, as it were, as for a business to invest in, because we're a well-established charity who delivers climbing, and Access Sport are well established in delivering the inclusive club network and training side of it. So I think that was important for certain funders to be aware of when they were taking part in the crowdfunder. Sorry if that's rambling off.
No, not at all. And I think your point around really kind of leaning on your networks, like everything that went on social media for NICAS Ascend was linked to Access Sport and other partners as well. And that's so key, is really using other people's audiences or linking in with their reach.
That's it, trying to get the word out, and trying as many different ways to get your message out as possible. And again, like, we're a national organisation, but each of our climbing walls, we had various climbing walls who have invested in Ascend and are really behind the message. So again, talking to your networks, if you've got a database of contacts, letting them know well in advance what you're planning to do if you're going to do a crowdfunder, so that really, ideally, I think, and again, this is a lesson learned if I was doing it again, you're really got everyone queued up and ready to go, to hit a donate button early on, because that gets that movement going and the drive and the momentum that I was talking about. And I think, again, going on to the crowdfunder pre-briefing that we had, that was also a key message to, if you think you've got everything ready, just try and do more, like, up front, because when you're in it, it's quite a lot just to keep it moving and focus. So the more you can do up front to get things teed up, the better. Yeah, and going back to the movement fund application, I said we put it in December, got the agreement in at the end of January. And I think I don't recall getting many questions back, but I think we had to send in quite a lot of information and just evidence, I guess, that we are able to be a funded recipient. So like our governance and there's lots of paperwork that we already had, but just making sure that we're like providing that when it's required.
Mm-hmm.
We had a month to confirm we want to accept the offer as well. So it's just making sure you're like keeping on track of the admin requirements from Sport England, which they're not onerous, but it needs to be done. And then once we receive the funding, there'll also be tracking and producing reports and receipts, and they have some stipulations around that as well. So yeah, just keeping having somebody to keep a track on all the actual project running of it as well. It's going to be awesome.
I think that ties in, doesn't it, to what we were saying around well, before you even start making a list, knowing exactly what you need, and then assigning someone to kind of manage that. Go on, Laura.
It was only just to mention that they were very, very strict about not funding anything that was started or part started or anything like that. It has to be completely new project.
Yes, you can't kind of be spending money whilst you're then applying and then hoping they might cover it. It's definitely not, I agree.
Yeah, I want to open it up to the floor in a second and see if we've got any other questions. But one question I wanted to ask both of you was if you had one bit of advice for anyone who's thinking about applying for the movement fund or starting a crowdfunder, what would your one bit of advice be? Sorry, that's really putting you on the spot as well.
I would just say there's nothing to lose. I know crowdfunding is a little bit more labour intensive, but for the Sports England, yeah, I just think why not try?
Yeah, I'm trying to think one piece of advice. The preparation, like give yourself enough time. But if you're confident in what you're trying to achieve and you know that it's a good thing to do, then yeah, go for it. But yeah, be aware of your timescales. So, you know, it just to apply and then to get the agreement of funding and then to do a crowdfunder, there's a certain period of time to factor in before you're even then receiving the money to then put the money into the work. So yeah, if you've got timescales in mind, just
I think what else helped us was we did like a expression of interest form. So we had a list of the amount of people that would want to attend. So it was showing that there was a need.
Yeah, I really like that idea, and just almost being able to evidence that this is exactly what our community is already asking for. So we just need help to do it, for sure. Well, thank you so much, both of you, for kind of sharing your experience of applying for the fund. I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens next with the crowdfunder and also next with the Skills Club. I always hear great things from Katie in Bristol about the Skills Club, so hopefully I'll be able to come down and visit at some point. I am going to open the floor now to either if people want to come off mute or pop a question in the chat. Either Abby or Laura, or we've also Tom's still on the call, and we've got a couple of other Access Sport fundraisers here as well. So
yeah, there's one in the chat about City Bridge Foundation only funding charities and not casks. So yeah, that's a really interesting point. I think that's a good role that organisations like us at Access Sport can play with other kind of the National Sport for Development charities. Let's have those conversations with those funders. Why won't they fund other organisations like yours? So yeah, leave that with us. Definitely, it's a good point. Thank you.
Sorry, that was my question. Just to add, we had a visit from City Bridge and to pay. We wanted money for an access audit, and they were so willing, and they were sitting on. There was up to £100,000 pot to do any work that was needed, and they were desperate to give it to us, but didn't realise it was a new person who didn't realise we were a cask. And I've tried the LTA, because obviously my voice talking to them won't make any difference, but it just, I think they set it up so long ago, they obviously made it simple, but it is just ruling out sports clubs. And especially at the time, they had so much money to give away. And you can't get access audits from many other charities paid for. So it would be a really good help if Access Sport could help to. They may say no, they've considered it, but I feel someone like you
adding that voice
would be fantastic.
Yeah, because we are funded currently by City Bridge Foundation as well. So we have a key manager there, so we can have that conversation.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks, Linda. Anyone else?
And I thought I was just going to make a point, sorry, Sean, about Abby's timeline. So December through to the end of January is an application, with Christmas in the middle. That's actually not that bad a turnaround, is it, in terms of time it takes from a grant funding perspective? So you can plan better in that way if you know it's going to be 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Anyone else got any questions for either Abby or Laura or Tom? Now's the chance.
Guys, this is Kevin from Salford and St Mary's. It's been great. Thank you very much. The thing about planning when you're going to, particularly crowdfunders, is incredibly important because, as was mentioned, you can put donations through, but you need to be able to tee your donations up. So if people donate once a year, and for us that tends to be August, September, that's when we hold our crowdfunder. So you kind of need to be aware, you need to speak to your donors in advance, obviously, and they have to pay through the crowdfunder. They can't just give you the money and you say, oh, look, these people have given us money. It doesn't count unless it goes through the crowdfunder. So I may be stating the obvious, but it's a very worthwhile thing to do, doing short videos. You go through an approval process first with them. So they will tell you whether you're going to be accepted or not. And the only other thing to be aware of is if you say you're going to raise £10,000, they will match fund 50% of that. So you get £5,000. If you raise £11,000, you'll still get the 5,000. If you raise £9,999, you will get nothing. So you have to do a lot of planning in advance with a team of people, obviously, so that you know that you're comfortable and know how you're going to achieve the amount. So, but anyone who wants to do it, it's a brilliant way of engaging with Sport England.
Amazing. Thanks, Kevin. Really appreciate that insight. We've got a question in the chat that's, sorry, Abby, did you?
Sorry, I'm just going to add to that. I totally agree with those points. And something that was, that did crop up actually that I forgot to mention, linked to that, and it's definitely worth speaking to people that will donate, especially companies, is how they're going to do it, and as you say, making sure that's been agreed and that they know how they can do it, because things like, I think the crowdfunder mainly like donate via credit card, and that's not always an easy thing to arrange with your donors. So just having those conversations up front helps with some of those sort of logistical headaches. Yeah, thanks for raising that.
Amazing. So we've got a question from Helen in the chat that says, I'm supporting a community club who have moved to a new venue and are planning a project to renovate a clubhouse to be accessible. Are there any organisations I can signpost them to for advice on how to build the clubhouse to be fully accessible? Then I will also help them fundraise, and I'm recommending a crowdfunder. Thanks for any help. Whereabouts are you based, Helen? Is maybe a good thing to know.
Yeah, thanks, Shauna. The club are based in Sleaford area, Lincolnshire. If that helps.
Yeah, so I think I'm guessing you have a contact at Access Sport, so speak to them. They'll have some great contacts and be able to point you in the right direction. Tom, have you got anyone that you can think off the top of your head?
No, I don't think so. I think I think, yeah, we'll need to take that one away and have a look at it, definitely, because that's, making it as fully accessible is absolutely key, isn't it, today? And I think that that there'll be people out there willing to help, but it's just finding them. And I think some of our Access Sport wider delivery team can definitely support on that. So we'll take that one away and come back to you, I think.
Thank you.
I'll follow up in an email, Helen, later in the week.
Thank you.
Brill. If there's anyone else has got a question, now's the time. I'm very aware we've only got a couple of minutes left and I don't want to keep you all too long. But if not, I will bring my slides back up. Give me 1 second. See all my notes as well. There you go, a little insight. There we go. So yeah, thank you so much everyone for joining us today. It's been really great to kind of hear about your own fundraising challenges, but also how Access Sport can continue supporting you with any fundraising that you are wanting to get involved in. And thanks so much, Abby and Laura. Like, hearing your experience is so useful, especially some insight into the crowdfunder that I know will probably be a new concept to a lot of people, and maybe not something that your club hasn't tried before. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. Like I said at the start, this has been hosted by our Inclusive Club Network. If you don't know what that is, I'll send an email out and you can join the network as part of Access Sport, and it's a way for you to stay engaged with us, but also to connect with other clubs who are also in the network. Our next event is actually next week. We're hosting a forum, which is a really casual kind of opportunity for clubs to get together, have a bit of conversation about what they're doing over the summer, what they're doing at the moment, or if you've got any challenges, it's an opportunity to share them and hear if any other clubs are experiencing something similar and how they've tackled it. So it'd be great to see some of you there. I'll send a link in a follow-up email. And then something that we talk about a lot is, obviously, as you're fundraising, you're also capacity building, and that means bringing on new volunteers, new coaches, and it's really key for them to have the same training across the board. So we've got some open trainings coming up over the next couple of weeks, or going live over the next couple of weeks. So keep an eye out for them. I will include that in my follow-up email. And if you want to get any new coaches or volunteers trained in our DI training or our ND training, please let us know and we can get them booked onto one of those courses. But for today, that's it. So thank you so much for joining us. If you've got any other questions, feel free to just pop them in the chat now and we can follow up after, or send me an email and we can get a bit of a conversation going. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us today, and hopefully see you at another Inclusive Club Network event soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye.